Hello everybody, it's another day and of course it's another video. So I hope that you're doing fine today as you watch this interesting video. So in this video lesson, we are going to talk about the novel entitled Pride and Prejudice written by Jane Austen. Okay? So before we proceed to the novel itself, to the summary of the novel itself, let's have first a short background about our author. Okay, so here we go. Our author is Jane Austen. Jane Austen was an English author whose novels have become timeless classics and have been adapted to films. That's why we have movie adaptations on Pride and Prejudice and those other literary works of Jane Austen. Television shows, of course, and modern tales a centuries after her passing in 1817. Loved for her astute ability to capture the beauty of ordinary characters, Jane Austen wrote beloved heroines in stories that serve as reflections of society at that time. Jane Austen, by the way, was born on December 16, 1775, in Hampshire, England. She was not widely known in her own time. Take note of that. Her novels gained popularity after 1869, and her reputation skyrocketed in the 20th century. Her novels, including Pride and Prejudice, are considered literary classics, bridging the gap between romance and realism. So Jane Austen began drafts of first impressions. So that's a title of a certain novel, which was later published as Pride and Prejudice. Yeah. Through 1811 to 1816, she published Pride and Prejudice, which she referred to as her darling child. Darling child. Today, Austen is considered one of the greatest writers in English history. Some literary works of Jane Austen include Elinor and Marian, which eventually published as Sense and Sensibility. Other work of Jane Austen, Love and Friendship. Then the story First Impressions, which later published as Pride and Prejudice, and of course, The Mansfield Park and Emma. So that's the short background of our author for today, Jane Austen. So this time, let's go down to the summary of the Pride and Prejudice written by Jane Austen. So here we go. Pride and Prejudice. It is a novel that opens with one of the most famous lines in English literature. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. The statement is seemingly what Mrs. Bennet thinks as she sets her sights on the newly arrived Bingley, who she is sure will make a suitable husband for one of her daughters. At a ball, Bingley takes an immediate interest in the beautiful and shy Jane. The encounter between his friend Darcy and Elizabeth is less cordial. Although Austen shows them intrigued by each other, she reverses the convention of first impressions. The pride of rank and fortune and prejudice against the social inferiority of Elizabeth's family hold Darcy aloof, while the pride of self-respect and prejudice against Darcy's snobbery hold Elizabeth equally aloof. Now, the pompous Collins soon arrives, hoping to marry one of the Bennet sisters. Mrs. Bennet steers him toward Elizabeth, but the latter refuses his offer of marriage. He instead becomes engaged to her friend Charlotte. During this time, Elizabeth encounters the charming Wickham. There is a mutual attraction between the two, and he informs her that Darcy has denied him his inheritance. After Bingley abruptly departs for London, Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy mounts as she becomes convinced that he is discouraging Bingley's relationship with Jane. Darcy, however, has grown increasingly fond of Elizabeth, admiring her intelligence and vitality. While visiting the now married Charlotte, Elizabeth sees Darcy, who professes his love for her and proposes. A surprised Elizabeth refuses his offer, and when Darcy demands an explanation, she accuses him of breaking up Jane and Bingley and of denying Wickham his inheritance. Darcy subsequently writes Elizabeth a letter in which he explains that he separated the couple largely because he did not believe Jane returned Bingley's affection. He also discloses that Wickham, after squandering his inheritance, tried to marry Darcy's then 15-year-old sister in an attempt to gain possession of her fortune. With these revelations, Elizabeth begins to see Darcy in a new light. Shortly thereafter, the youngest, Bennet's sister, Lydia, elopes with Wickham. The news is met with great alarm by Elizabeth since this scandalous affair, which is unlikely to end in marriage, could ruin the reputation of the other Bennet sisters, of course. When she tells Darcy, he persuades Wickham to marry Lydia, offering him money. Despite Darcy's attempt to keep his intervention a secret, Elizabeth learns of his actions. At the encouragement of Darcy, Bingley subsequently returns, and he and Jane become engaged. Finally, Darcy proposes again to Elizabeth, who this time accepts. And that is the end of the novel entitled Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen.